a very interesting topic, and it's something that I think will teach you quite a bit about getting a job and also a different attitude about getting a job in terms of the way people think about it coming from Yale Law School. And the career paths of Yale Law School graduates are so different than graduates of other schools, including Harvard and Stanford and Chicago and Columbia and Michigan and Virginia and Duke, that it really is worth talking about and quite unusual, as a matter of fact. It's a much different approach to a career than any of those schools. People that come out of your regular kind of top 10 schools or top 14 schools or top 25 schools often look at career success as working in a law firm and getting a good job there. That they're very competitive doing that and starting your own firm or going in-house. But Yale Law School graduates are a lot different. And I'm going to talk about that today and the reasons I think that is and what I've noticed. And every day I receive applicants of people that went to Yale Law School. And their resumes are, for the most part, very unusual. You very, very rarely see a resume of someone that went to Yale Law School that after they graduate, they go to work in a law firm, for example. You do see people that have worked in law firms, but at the same time, the career path is much different than, at least these are the resumes that I've seen over the past quarter century. Sometimes these attorneys start out in large law firms. Many times, a good percentage of the time, they work in law firms during the summer. But something happens to these attorneys after a few years of practice. They take jobs in the government and academia, with policy think tanks, overseas with public interest organizations, or in the US with public interest organizations. And then it's almost as if they bounce around from these types of jobs, from job to job. And then when I finally see the resumes, they may be like 6 or 7 years out of law school or more, and all are these things that don't have anything to do with working in a law firm. And a lot of these attorneys also never work in a law firm. So I see resumes all the time of attorneys that are 5, 6, 10, 15 years out of school, and they've never worked in a law firm, or if they did, it was extremely brief. And then their resume contains all of these think tank policy and public interest and nonprofit, and that could go on, but it's almost anything but a law firm. And by the time they're interested in working in a law firm, they really can't because they don't have the experience. And law firms, of course, are impressed with people that go to Yale Law School, but as a commodity and as someone that they can rely on to work and that's going to be committed and wants to work in a law firm, it's very odd because they can't. And sometimes they'll even contact me. It's very funny. I'll get resumes and the person will say in a cover letter that I would be interested in a partner role in a large law firm, and meaning they expect a law firm to look at Yale Law School and just immediately offer them a partnership, even though they've never worked in a law firm. And I see this not a lot, but I've seen it enough that it's definitely a pattern, and it's very interesting. And the jobs that a lot of these attorneys go to, they're jobs that I think can be competitive to get, so that there's a lot of people that are trying to get jobs in different departments of the Department of Justice and working in politics and things. So they're not, or working as law professors is another huge one. It's what the Clintons did, for example. But the jobs are, most of them don't pay particularly well. They're not demanding in the sense that the attorneys are expected to, and if they're in a legal role, they're not expected to go to work and be there for 12 hours a day or 15 hours a day. They have lives outside of that. And the economic value of these jobs, meaning if they're sitting down and doing work, is it producing money? Typically, it's very negligible. A lot of these jobs are funded by things that don't require a lot of accountability. So if your job is to sit around a policy think tank and think about things and write about things and talk to people, that doesn't really have accountability. Or if your job is I don't know, but it's not like you're billing hours. And if you're an attorney inside of a law firm and your billing rates, say it's hypothetically $1,000 an hour, and you work 2,400 hours a year, that means you're generating $2.4 million for the law firm, and the law firm will pay you a very small percentage of that, maybe $300,000 or $400,000. So you're generating wealth. But in the jobs that a lot of these Yale Law School graduates do, You wonder, where's the wealth coming from? There's no wealth being generated. And because they're not accountable to real clients and no billable hours, there's no way to say, hey, you're doing a great job or you're not doing a great job. It's just not there because your clients are often governments, think tanks, law schools with a lot of money where they can sit around and philosophize about different ideas, and groups with a lot of money to spend without requiring a lot of accountability. And so these jobs in many cases, now I'm not saying they all are, because sometimes they're clerkships that are 1 year, 2 years, or they could be jobs with public interest organizations or fellowships and that sort of thing. But these jobs are safe compared to what law firm. You don't see, I talk to attorneys every day that are laid off and fired as first years and second years, and that's scary. And these people go to Harvard and they go to Stanford and Chicago and Columbia and all these good schools. But within reason, all those attorneys are accountable. They're forced to do really good work. They're questioned if they don't do great work. They're pressured with hours. They're on a partnership track where they're competing with a bunch of other cutthroat people. But Yale Law School graduates do not go into those kind of jobs very often. As a matter of fact, they get so far off the track in most cases that it becomes very unlikely for them to ever work in a law firm. And if they started out in a law firm, the route that they take is so far away from working in a law firm that they'll never be able to go back. And they may not want to, but they're very surprised when the market doesn't welcome them back. Because if you want to work in a law firm and get the advantages of working in a law firm, which I think are huge, meaning as a young attorney, you're getting trained in a certain way of thinking and working. And then once you become proficient in a practice area, you can start getting clients and running matters, whether deals or cases. And then you can take your skills and try to get clients. And once you get clients, you have a business, which is a book of business. And you can take your book of business to other firms or set up your own firm. So the law firm model, I think, is awesome. I think there's obviously a lot of drawbacks, but these Yale Law School graduates basically disqualify themselves from the ability to run a legal business with their degrees right away or very quickly. And I've pondered this for the longest time, and I've wondered, what the hell? Like these resumes of these graduates, they're just no one who's going to be interested in them. And then when they go to workplaces, they go to work. I think about it. Maybe I'll commit. You just don't know. And again, my job is to place people in law firms. So I'm just talking to you from the standpoint of someone that's watched this. But when I compare the resumes of people who went to Yale Law School to those of other top law schools, I've always thought the people at Yale seem lost and as if they don't know what they're doing. And it seems crazy to me. And then even law firms will tell me, like the top law firms, we don't like hiring people from Yale Law School. They're not good corporate attorneys. They're not good litigators. They're not good. And really, why? Like, why, if someone has the potentially the best LSAT scores and the best grades, and not only do you have to have good grades to go to Harvard or Yale Law School, but the school will look at the type of classes you took, and they'll say, wow, this person majored in Greek, and then they also became proficient in Japanese and can write at a college level in Japanese, even though they learned Japanese as a freshman. And they're very interesting people, or the Maddox, and just all very smart people. I've also thought about the school and with the resumes, and because they give such an appearance of aimlessness. And the other thing that's interesting is if you look at the Career Services Office of Yale Law School and the type of resources they put out, they're very good. They have it's a very good career services office in terms of the quality of stuff they produce. So I don't think that the school necessarily bears any problems or is not serving the students. I think that there's probably a culture of the school that makes people decide not to work in law firms, and that other types of work are more fulfilling and better for them. And when these attorneys are looking for jobs, and I think there's a culture that probably is built up over decades of that. But when these people call up, they typically expect to join these law firms, but law firms aren't having it. And a lot of them become law professors, and they'll say things like, I would like to join a firm like Gibson Dunn or Melvin as a partner, but I'd like to try to get myself to 40 hours a week if possible. And this level of arrogance and entitlement because they got good LSAT scores and grades and took hard classes and got into a good law school is amazing. Because, why? What the heck? Just because there's people that are just as smart as law school graduates. They would go to Harvard and they go to Chicago and they go to Columbia and they go to Michigan and they go to USC and UCLA. But then they'll add what kind of vacation benefits do they offer? And when I talk to people from Yale Law School, I often think they're in an alternative universe. Like they don't understand like that the law firms are businesses, and just because you went to a good law school doesn't mean they want you to be doesn't mean you can generate money from them in their business. And so this example of a law professor makes me question this, because I hear this all the time. And I wonder to myself, I'm out of touch with reality. And why would someone with 7 years of experience teaching 3 classes a semester in law school, and then heck in the summers off, and who's written maybe 3 or 4 really good law review articles that have been in top 25 law reviews, it's what would make them qualified possibly to work in a major law firm. And I've had these conversations a lot, and they've never made sense to me. Because if you talk to people that went to Columbia, Michigan, Duke, and other schools, they would never have the audacity to be so careless with their careers and never come back. They do, of course. People from top law schools go off track, but they don't go off track in the way that Yale Law School graduates do, and taking jobs that don't pay a lot and so forth. And that are in public interest and government and stuff. What other people do, which is very interesting, is they follow the rules and play by those rules, whereas Yale Law School graduates feel a different set of rules applies to them. Very interesting, because it's almost as if they're above it or clueless, and I think it's being above it. And meaning they don't think it's important. They think other things are important. So initially, after years of looking at these resumes, I came to the following conclusions: that Yale Law School graduates, in terms of their careers, had no idea what they're doing, that I probably needed to talk to them when they came along and give them a lesson in different value systems. And then I needed to help them be more effective attorneys and get real jobs and then commit to them. And I used to give speeches at law schools, and I don't really do it much anymore because it requires travel. But I often told future attorneys that they were not as great as they thought. But Yale Law School was fascinating to me. And I often thought about giving this school a call, because I wanted to tell them and talk to them about why are these attorneys coming out that have these kind of aimless careers, but this like huge arrogance associated with them. What's wrong? And they're very angry a lot of times when you tell them this. And you tell them like, listen, man, you haven't played by the rules, so no top law firm is going to hire you. And then they end up mad and not producing economically like they'd like to. Often, man, I'm trying to be rude here, but a lot of times living alone with no kids. And this is very interesting. What's going on here? And so again, I've never called up Yale Law School and told them my thoughts, but the idea occurred to me. And then I started thinking about it. Could this be a good choice of what they're doing? Do they actually know something about the world and legal careers that I don't know? And that if you look beneath the surface, could it be that these graduates are actually some of the smartest, most well-balanced and career-savvy attorneys imaginable? Meaning, is there some sort of logic to this? And because obviously they've produced an incredible number of well-known national important figures and done very well, people that have done extremely well in the market, and meaning doing, whether it's being the president of the United States or a governor or a senator or a writer or a law professor, and they've produced a lot of very successful people. So my thought was, maybe I had it wrong. Maybe the logic of these students from lesser schools, meaning things other than Yale Law School, was flawed. And the people at Yale knew something that people like myself, who frankly, and probably you, are followers. So meaning I don't consider myself a follower, but what I know about legal careers and what I was taught was that I should think about law firms and maybe a clerkship, and then from there, try to have a career in a law firm. Again, I thought maybe I had it all wrong. And maybe the logic of these graduates of lesser schools was flawed, and the people at Yale were right. And so I'm going to tell you why in a minute. And maybe they knew something I didn't know. And I thought about it, and I thought about it for a long time. And I think I understand it now, because there's something you pick up when you study these graduates, that many times they may actually be happier and have better careers. After all, they're not toiling around in law firms and doing all these political games and having to bring in business. And I think I understand what they're doing. And I've already told you, but I'm going to tell you again. And knowing this now, I'm actually very impressed because what they're doing is available to you and can profoundly change your career. And when I was in law school, I remember years ago, I was going out to some bar or something with a friend of mine, and we were sitting in a car and waiting for, I don't know, but this is great. All you need to do is take classes here for 3 years, and then you can make, back then the salaries were much lower, $80,000 a year. And obviously today it would be multiples of that, but meaning right out of school. But this is, what this future attorney was saying. If you get a law degree, you can rent yourself out and make all this money. Basically, that's what he was saying. If you get a degree, you can go in the market and this is what you're worth. So that's how a lot of attorneys think. They think about getting jobs. This is the kind of attitude that pervades NYU, for example, or most big law schools or prestigious law schools. The idea is you get a job, you get a degree from a good school, you're more marketable, you're worth more than you were before you got the degree, and you can go out in the market and make a lot of money. That's the thought process. And what I think is the traditional way of thinking about a career, which is how most attorneys think, again, is that they want to rent themselves out for as much money as possible. So attorneys think in terms of their salaries and then what they're getting, and they're fascinated with it. If you go to blogs, they talk about salaries. If you go to top law schools, for example, like the website, people are talking about money. If you go to wherever people are, whatever the legal career type stuff is, people are talking about money. And this is what's important to them. And so attorneys trying to make the most money will always say, this is my salary expectation. This is how much money I want to make. This is what I want to make in another firm. And a lot of them will go to New York because it traditionally is paid the most, or they'll go to big cities and big firms. And New York is interesting because the taxes and it's hard to advance and the hours are bad, and people feel badly when they don't get these jobs. Every week on these webinars, there's people that are trying to get a higher salary or upset about their compensation or wanting to get into big law and all this stuff. And this is how most attorneys think. And they think that if they're not doing this, there's something wrong with them. And this is what they're about. Most lawyers are all about charging rent. So why aren't Yale Law School students thinking this way? What does these people know that you don't know that is going on in the market? And most lawyers will shape their careers in ways that allow them to charge as much rent as possible. They want to go to the biggest firms that pay the most money, and if they're not there, they feel badly, and they try to get work in ones that'll pay them more money. And this is what it's about. It's about rent. How much do you rent yourself out for? And this is what people think about. They think about it when they get jobs as partners. They think about it when they get jobs as associates. They think about it when they move firms. It's all about rent. And the idea is that if you're an attorney, you can rent yourself out for a certain amount per hour, and you want to rent yourself out to the law firm that will give you the highest rent. And when the work dries up, and a law firm no longer will give you work, then you rent yourself out to companies or sometimes the government, but generally companies or a smaller law firm where you might not get as much rent, but you'll still get rent. And if the whole idea of salaries and jobs and so forth, the way attorneys think about it is rent, meaning you're renting yourself out and you're trying to get as much rent as you can. Now, this is not how all attorneys think about it, but a lot of them do, way more than half. And I don't know what the percentage is. It could be 80%, but it's high. And so people want to get as high a salary as they possibly can and as much money as they possibly can. And often the things that I think are important when you join a big law firm, like learning and getting taught to look at things in detail, aren't really what it's about. So most attorneys, you just have to face it, are rent seekers. And you're going to succeed based on your ability to find people to pay you rent. That's pretty much how people think about it. And the higher rent you get, the better you'll do. So these are economic things that underlie the legal profession. And so I would think, since this is such a drive that most attorneys have, that you would want to understand these rules and what they mean. So this is just a kind of an offhand example, but my first summer of law school, I worked at the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. And for whatever reason, and there were a lot of Yale Law School graduates, I was on a floor of maybe 20 attorneys, and I think there were 5 or 6 people that were Yale Law School graduates, and they all seemed very smart guys. They would come in 9 or 10, and by 5:30, the entire floor was cleared out and they were gone. And they did things like play softball, belong to softball leagues, but they all seemed to have a lot of free time. And I would look at this with kind of amazement. I would be like, what are they doing? Like, why would they work in the Justice Department where they're making a half or maybe even less than half of what attorneys are making in private practice? They must be crazy. Like, why would they do this? What are they thinking? And certainly I realized that, there's a nobility to working for the Justice Department, and they were working on huge matters, things that had national importance. But I didn't look at it that way. I looked at it like, why are they working these jobs that don't pay as much? And a lot of them seemed incredibly happy in these jobs. And they always spoke about how much they liked them and how happy they were. And to me, I would look at that and I would walk out of this building. It was main justice, and walk down the street, and there were offices of big firms, and I would see those attorneys and I would be like, wow, that's what I want to do. I don't want to be like these people in the Justice Department. And I would think, why are they making half of what they could make in a large law firm? And I'd be like, God, what's wrong? What's going on? And even though I was excited to have this job, I certainly would have much rather had a job as a summer associate in a law firm. And then I'd go down to the basement where they had a cafeteria, and I'd have lunch with them, and I'd wonder what was wrong. And I would be like, why would they work 2 years for what they could get for doing 1 year? And then the next summer, I was an associate at my second summer at a large New York law firm. And then I was doing a clerkship the year after I worked as a summer associate. And the firm found out that I was, and my school had told me that a clerkship would help me in my career. So I decided to do it. But when I got to the law firm, all the associates in the firm were puzzled. They were like, why would you do a clerkship? You would make in half of what you would make here. And that's crazy. And meanwhile, a lot of these associates in the firm were very unhappy, which is funny. And they certainly weren't talking about practicing law with as much happiness and enthusiasm as the attorneys in the Justice Department were. But I didn't pick that up. I was like, wow, these guys are sharp dressers. They're smart. They've got these cool jobs. And I just thought about it differently. So this is the problem with most rent-seeking attorneys, and especially ones, and again, I'm not being critical of you or anything, but the ones that cast their lots by charging law firms money for their services, is that they're often in a situation where they can only charge high rent for so long. What that means is this is what happens to them. So I remember, I don't know what it was, but it was 8 or 9 years out of law school, or 7 or 8 years. The friend of mine that was bragging about how much money he was going to make, or how great it was to get a law degree, called me, and he was very upset. He'd been working the law firm and charging rent, I don't know, maybe it was 12 years, and had become a non-equity partner in a major firm. It was a big firm in Richmond, which you probably heard of, and he had 3 children, a house, and a wife, and he thought he was doing well, but the law firm basically came to him and said, hey, you don't have enough business, and it doesn't make sense for us. So basically what they're saying, and this is what they say, this is the logic of what happens. You become a partner in a lot of major law firms. They'll make you a non-equity partner. And if you don't bring business, that means you're going to be reliant on other partners to give you business. And your billing rate as a partner is going to be high. And so a lot of those partners would prefer to do the work themselves or give it to senior associates. That's just how it is. And so they will basically ask you to hit the road. And sometimes they'll make you a counsel and stuff, but generally it's hit the road. And so the law firm basically came and told him he no longer had a job, and he couldn't believe it. He was like, I billed all these, and this is what associates always say, I billed all these hours. I was the highest biller in my class, my partner. And, so what this guy did is he sold his house actually and became a solo practitioner. And because he realized that and this is what a lot of people realize, that when they take these jobs with big law firms, and at some point it ends. It can end when there's a recession. It can end when you get senior and don't have business. It can end, but there's definitely not a lot of security in trying to charge high rent for your services in a law firm forever. Meaning, unless you bring in business, you're at some point, things are going to catch up with you. And you have to, just from an economic standpoint, provide a lot more benefit, or you have to provide a lot more benefit than you're taking, meaning the economic rules have to really be in your favor, meaning if you don't have business, you're billing 3,000 or whatever hours per year a ton. You're billing a lot. So whatever they're paying you has to be very little compared to the economics of what you're getting. There's an interesting thing that happened. It was after the financial crisis, all these banks, and I don't know what bank it was, I think Citibank, all these banks got money from the government to stay in business and stuff. And there was someone that managed, traded options and did all this kind of stuff and had a very good sense for it. And at I believe Citibank, and he made $100 million a year. And they called the bank. These senators did this hearing, and I don't know, they were doing this Dodd-Frank bill. I don't know what was going on, but they had this huge hearing, and they brought the bank and the CEO of the bank, and they said, "We can't believe it. This is awful that you're paying someone $100 million a year. How do you expect us to be bailing you out and doing all this stuff when you're paying one person that much money?" And the bank, whoever was talking, said, "You don't understand. Like, we pay him $100 million a year, but he generates $4 billion a year for us. That's how much he's made. He's got an incredible sense for this. And not only that, but if he decided he didn't like it here, anybody would hire him. Why would they not? He's making us $3 billion, $900 million a year." So it's like that when you're an attorney too. And so then all of a sudden, making $100 million a year makes sense. That's what people do that do very well financially, is they provide much more money than they're taking. Basketball players and athletes making hundreds of millions of dollars. I just read a story today about some soccer player being paid $400 million by a soccer team in Saudi Arabia. Anybody that's getting that kind of money, you can better believe that they're generating multiples. So someone's getting $100 million a year, they're probably generating 500 million or a billion, much more. So that's how the rules work. But you need to think about that as an attorney. You can't just expect to get a high salary and get paid in a law firm unless you're providing a heck of a lot more benefit. And everybody is a rational actor. So what that means is law firms, just like you when you're hiring people, they want attorneys that are going to bill the most hours and be the hungriest. And then why would they want to pay a partner $800,000 a year when an associate that's making half of that can do the same work and be more profitable and take less work? Everybody's a rational economic actor. So it's very important to understand that. And if you understand the rule of that, and then what are you doing to make yourself more valuable to law firms? Are you studying your practice area? Are you becoming an expert? Are you learning new stuff every day? Are you continually improving? And if you're not, why not? And because the people that are going to be very successful in law firms are going to learn about all this. The most successful lawyers spend a lot of time listening to self-improvement type things, meaning if they want to be an expert in litigation, maybe they listen to talks about closing arguments and things. People are just constantly improving, and a lot of people aren't. They think that they can get comfortable in a law firm and don't realize that all these economic forces are operating in the background. And if you understand one thing today, it's like you need to be afraid of those, because there's hungrier people coming along, there's smarter people coming along, there's more people that want your job coming along, and there's people that can provide more value at a lesser cost coming along. So what happens to a lot of these attorneys when the economic train stops is there's divorces, there's all sorts of problems. And again, I think divorces are very common because they happen because of money problems. And many times when people get too stressed out, a lot of people realize that rent won't be paid forever. And so no matter how technically proficient you are, if employers don't need to pay you the amount of money they're paying, then they're not going to keep you around. And these rules just are what operates in the market economy. The market economy is brutal. Now you have AI and things that is working to replace some types of attorneys. You can summarize things and transcripts, and there's so much that can happen. If you don't understand these rules, and then you're going to be always in a lot of trouble. And law firms and the market run on very aggressive economic rules. And the bigger the city and the bigger the firm, the more those economic rules are running in the background. And economic rules basically mean efficiency, the most value for the least amount of money, all that kind of stuff. The people that are easiest to work with, opposed to hard to work with. And law firms are always, and attorneys are always looking, values, the law firms are always looking for the maximum value. And same thing with you when you're looking for a job. And if a law firm can get someone younger and hungrier than you, they will. And if they can pay someone less, they will. And if they don't have to make you partner, they won't. Like most people, when the time they make partner, they deserve to be a partner. They provided so much more value. It's just almost as if, why wouldn't you make them partner? You'd have to be crazy not to. And if they pay you less money, if they can pay you less money, they will. If they can pay you less of the revenue you're generating, they will. And so this is just the economics of law firms. And they operate to extract the maximum value they can off of attorneys. And there's just a constant force in the law firm world, and it's stressful. This is why people are stressed. This is why people work so hard. This is why people have health problems and all this stuff working in law firms. And the economics of any economic system are brutal because law schools are churning out 30,000 attorneys a year, whatever the number is. And then they're all hungry and they all want the kind of job you have. And these economic rules are brutal. And that's what you're up against when you work in a law firm, especially in large cities. And so law firms lay people off. People are afraid of losing their jobs. People are stressed out and don't exercise or whatever, and they take care of themselves or drink too much and become with alcohol, pills, divorces, weight gain, weight loss, cancer, heart attacks, and all this stuff. That's what the economic system does to attorneys. I'm just sorry, it does. I know so many attorneys. I'm like, where is this person? Like someone I worked with early in my career, like, where are they? And then I looked them up and it was a young associate and you hear they had a heart attack or they died of cancer or they've gone insane or they've been not insane, but yeah, insane, or they've gone to prison. A lot of people I know so many attorneys that went to prison. I don't even know what to say about that. It's just people that were started out in major firms. Weird. And so the reality is working in a law firm surrounded by all these economic realities is tough. I know attorneys have killed themselves. I know multiple ones that are dead. These are law firm attorneys in their early 40s. And this economic system is absolutely brutal because law firms are trying to extract as much value out of you as they can. And you're competing with other people that are trying to provide value in your law firm and in other law firms. These are some reasons, why it's tough. And there's also a lot of reasons why it's difficult to get into a job with a lot of law firms. It's because those large law firms, because they can afford to pay high rent. But the main reason is there's a power imbalance. And law firms operate on the premise that some people will figure out how to figure out the hidden rules and make the system work for them, and others will not. So law firms, for example, generally don't care if you understand and figure out these rules because they have so much power and money that they're going to continue succeeding anyway. Law firms don't care. If they have a class of 50 attorneys that starts and 25 are gone in a year, they don't care. They have the money and power to succeed either way. And very few attorneys ever understand the system. And because of this, most of them don't succeed in law firms, unfortunately. And because the idea of charging rent is something people just never escape. They believe that once they go to law school, and they get an initial job paying a certain amount of money, that they're going to be entitled to charge rent as long as possible. And they think that they're worth a certain amount of rent. And so what happens is when the pool dries up or a law firm's not willing to pay rent or the rent's not high enough at the firm, meaning they can make more money elsewhere, they try to find a place where they can rent themselves out. And a lot of times, very mature attorneys, by the way, realize that as they get senior and so forth, that expecting to get a position paying the same amount of money as they're making in a huge firm is not easy. But the emphasis, of course, is on the rent and what they're charging. Large law firms, and we will get back to Yale Law School in a minute, but all this is relevant. They can stay in power and they have the upper hand because they can pay high rent. They have clients that are willing to pay them high rent, and then they can pay high rent to their associates and others working for them. But this stress and power imbalance means that if you want to keep working for someone that's paying you high rent, you're going to be under a lot of pressure. ideally, if you're a smart attorney, so this is where I really want you to think for a second. If you're a smart attorney, you're going to figure out how to get as much rent as you possibly can, doing work you like without the stress. Because, what a legal career is, and what most careers are, is about how you charge rent, how you receive rent, and ultimately, in my opinion, staying alive and being happy. It's ironic that I teach and instruct people about law firms, but yet I don't work in a law firm. I work with law firms and attorneys, but I'm in the position I am because for me, working in a law firm is something that when I calculated the cost benefit and so forth, and I had businesses when I was very young doing construction and asphalt and so forth. But the idea is that you need to be alive and happy in addition to the rent. And that's important. You want to be happy, you want to stay alive, and you want to basically have a balance between what is it you charge for your rent and what do you get being happy? And that's the problem. And so here's what happens with Yale Law School. When you think about all this, them charging rent and their happiness, a lot of what they're doing, and most of what they're doing, makes sense because even though they may not do this instinctively, or that they may not have made this calculation, whatever the ethos is that people are picking up while at this school and so forth, whatever they're thinking, however that works, there's some sort of culture there that's telling people, that's really teaching people about the rules of rent, meaning people having these high IQs and great backgrounds and stuff has made think about things in a different way. Yale Law School graduates, obviously a lot of them, go into academia. Law schools love hiring Yale Law School graduates to do academic related work. They go into public service, nonprofits, government, and all these things. And if you think about what they're doing, it's actually very smart. They're finding groups many times that have a lot of money. Think about a law school. They charge, I don't know what they charge these days, but say a law school's charging $100,000 a year and they have 300 students. That's a lot of money. What is that, $30 million a year? And if they have 500 students, that's 500 million. And they put 75 in 5 lecture rooms and they pay a professor a few $100,000. I mean, what these Yale Law School students are doing, very smart, is they're finding groups in employers who has more money than the government. Nonprofits get all this money from people because they do good or whatever. And a lot of nonprofits aren't that efficient with the money. Government certainly doesn't have the reputation for being efficient with money. They're finding groups that have a lot of money that will pay them as much money as they can afford to pay them, which usually is nowhere near what a law firm will pay, but law schools can obviously pay. And then they actually have the least amount of accountability, meaning if you work in a law firm, like you're accountable, like every hour is accountable, like your bill, everything's accountable. Do you have enough work? Are you working hard enough? And so what they're doing is they're escaping the market economy and they're going to a place where these rules that are brutal, that are killing people, it's true, don't apply. And so if you take a job with the government, what you're doing is you're going to work for a pretty inefficient employer that has a near limitless supply of work and money, meaning these employers, the government has money. Whoever said the government's efficient? Whoever said law schools are efficient? You're going to work with these people with an unlimited supply of money and that has a lot of work and isn't going to make you accountable. There's not a lot of oversight. If you're inefficient with your time, there's no client to question your bills. There's no senior partner saying you work too much on this. You can pretty much, I'm not saying you're not accountable if you are a U.S. attorney in certain types of jobs, but for the most part, you can sit down and work and then you can leave at 5:30 and have a good time. And you can maybe have better health and have a very good life. And these types of jobs they're taking, you hear certainly law schools close and things happen, but layoffs, I don't know. Does the government lay off people a lot? Do state governments do jobs as politicians? I guess you could lose your job as a politician, but all of this is rare, meaning it's not happening as much as it's happening with law firms. If you're a corporate associate in a law firm and the market goes south, and then you will lose your job. You're no longer entitled to charge rent. But in the government, if things go south, or a law school, they have student loans that are paying. It's different. And if you're taking a job in a law school, that's a pretty much an inefficient employer, supported by tuition. They have huge endowments, some of them of $1 billion, hundreds of millions of dollars. And you need to write, and you need to show up and teach some classes, but the pressures are different. And then you get to be a tenured person where you can work the rest of your life. I had a course professor that I think was teaching up until his 90s. It's just the pressures are different, and the money just keeps coming. And if you get tenure, then you have a lifetime job where you get a lifetime of being able to be inefficient. And layoffs, they just don't happen. You're part of the normal market economy, and so forth. So these are things to understand. You can talk about improving the world, but sometimes, of course, you do. But this is what I see, and in what you're doing when with these Yale Law School students are doing, is they're finding a way to charge the most amount of rent for the most respected job with the least stress and accountability possible. And it's brilliant. It's when you think about it. You certainly don't see Yale Law School students being judged for the stress of working in a public interest organization. Maybe they do, but it's different. And Bill Clinton graduated, and certainly his first inclination was not to work in a law firm. He decided to teach at the University of Arkansas, and then became president, or first he became governor, I don't know, and then he became president of the United States. Wow, guess who else did that? Barack Obama. So by taking these jobs, these people have extra time on their hands, and they also have the ability to take that experience and keep their strength and their insight and apply it. How many times you hear of attorneys from Skadden in New York or something deciding that they, after a couple of years, that they become governor and then president? It just doesn't happen because they're different jobs. And so someone like Clinton is a rent seeker. Now you have J.D. Vance, who wrote a book. I don't know what he did when he graduated from law school. Then he went to work for Peter Thiel. I don't know. But these people are managing to avoid the rules of the market economy. And they find institutions that are willing to pay them rent, but they're not really economically accountable in the same way. Meaning, you don't go to work in a law school and they say, we expect you to write down everything you do for 2,500 hours a year. So these attorneys are actually brilliant. And this is brilliant what someone like Clinton did. They figure out the system. And what do you think would happen if Barack Obama had taken a position at Sidley and Austin, where he was a summer associate? Do you think, what would his career path have been like? What kind of stress would he have been under? I don't know, did he fail the bar? It doesn't matter. What would his life have been like? I don't know. He might have received more money out of law school, but he would have had to work his tail off. Same thing with Bill Clinton. I don't think Barack Obama would have become involved in politics. Now, he didn't go to Yale Law School, but I'm using this as an example of a type of path that a lot of Yale Law School graduates follow. And Barack Obama probably would have he certainly wouldn't have had time to get involved in politics. He might have even gotten laid off. He might have been on the council at some point and worried about keeping his job. Or look at Bill Clinton. Do you think Bill Clinton, can you imagine him going to work at a large New York City law firm and playing that game? What would have happened to him, or where would he be today? When you expose yourself to the market economy, you're going to go in a far different direction than people who don't. And what people at Yale Law School are doing is they're learning that there's a lot of real advantages to being strategic about how they rent themselves out, meaning they're not renting themselves out. They're not looking for the most money. They're looking for a place that allows them to, I would say, use their mind in creative ways and to have the least, to work for people with the most money and the least accountability. Think about that. Awesome. Very smart. And that's where that's going. When you're an attorney, and I'm saying this to everyone watching this and now and in the future, you need to be very careful about how you rent yourself out, because the most profound understanding of the market economy and your value comes when you can avoid these rules and rent yourself out to someone that has a deep pocket and doesn't have a lot of accountability, meaning they have a lot of money And they're not watching, they're putting it to use in a law school or they're putting it to use in the government, but they're not watching you very closely. And so what you should pick up for this, and this is extremely important, is, and it could change your life and career, is that you need to receive rent from the deepest pockets possible with the least amount of accountability possible and outside the rules of the market economy. And I'll tell you, the best job that I ever had by far was as a clerkship in Bay City, Michigan, in a federal court when I got out of law school. That was a great job. I would show up around, 8 o'clock, and I would go up to it was also a post office. I would go up and grab the judge's mail and put it on his desk because his mail came in early. And then I would sit down and work on some motions or whatever, making decisions about different argument things that were before the court. Then I would go sit in the court and help the judge do hearing. Great job. Then boom, he's out of there at 4:30 and I'm out of there at 5 with the other clerk. And what do? We go play tennis, we watch TV, we go out to eat. It's great. This is people that find these jobs where you don't have a lot of accountability. You become very successful. And this is a good path, meaning I place people in law firms, fine. But think about this path. If you're in a law firm, which of course is what I represent, but you're exposing yourself to a career in the market economy. And the market economy does reward excellent people and people that provide a lot more value than they take. Meaning, if you generate $100 million as a trader at Citibank, if you get paid $100 million, you're generating $4 billion. What is that? 2.5%, or I don't know what it is. I think it's 2.5% of what you're generating. So think about that. And the market economy is going to push and pull, and then it's going to set you into competition with others and stress you out. People are going to undermine you. You're going to be chewed up. You're going to have to fight harder and play games and all sorts of things. And life's going to be very demanding. It's going to keep you away from your family. It's going to get you maybe divorced. And it may give you a nice car to drive home with. It may give you a nice house. But is it worth it? I don't know. So Yale Law School graduates learned that, and I don't know how they're learning this, but this is the path that they follow, that there's often more benefit in escaping the economy than being part of it. And this is the rule that I want to teach you, is that when you go to work with people where you don't have as much accountability, meaning I'm not saying that every Yale Law School graduate, every government job, every public interest, every law school job doesn't have accountability, but there are different forms of accountability, and they allow more freedom of thought, more time to contemplate things, less stress many times. And this can be a huge lesson and something that you really need to think about. There's more benefit of escaping these forces in the economy many times than being part of it. And again, the time to ponder and think and strategize, and maybe even if you have enough time on your hands, you can think about being president and getting involved in, I don't know what they called Barack Obama before he became a senator. And I actually knew someone that ran against him, and he lives in Malibu now. And when he won the Senate seat, or I think, anyway, whatever. And what is he? A community organizer? What associate is going to have the time to be a community organizer in Chicago because they need to build. That's the job. Think about that. I'm going to take a quick break. I do have to end a little early today, but I do have about a half hour or so for questions. I think that I can see already there's a lot of questions. So if I don't get to your question today, then I'll definitely answer it next week. That's the same thing I did, I think, the week before, but I do always answer all the questions. I just don't always have time during the webinar. I'm going to take just a 2-minute break, and then when I come back, I'll get to the question. The first question is, how important is it for law students and legal professionals to have a strong sense of community and connection to their peers and alumni? I don't know. That's an interesting question. I personally think that people are happiest when they're around people that support them, when they're around people who support them. What does that mean? That means that when you're around people that you feel are building you up and you feel connected to people and you have a sense of community, then you're more happy. I think one of the things that's interesting is where I live in Southern California, there's all of these rehab centers all over. So if you go into any nice community by the beach, there's always going to be all these rehab centers. And essentially what they do in these rehab centers is they just bring in a bunch of people that have the same problems, and they interact, and some of them go to AA meetings. And so the whole idea of taking people that are unhappy and have problems is that you become much happier when you have a sense of community. And so a lot of these jobs that people from Yale Law School and so forth are doing they're around people. When you're a teacher, you're not in a competitive atmosphere. If you're a law professor, it is competitive to get tenure and stuff, but you're teaching teachers and, talking to peers, and it's just different. It's just something to think about. Is it important to be around others? Yes, it's very important. And one of the reasons I think that people are very unhappy working inside of law firms is that they're competitive with everybody there. So meaning they're competitive with their peers, they're competitive with other attorneys, they're competitive with a lot of people themselves, and they feel isolated. You're in an office and a lot of people aren't your friends. And I think that that's one of the things that can be very scary. Now, is it like that in every firm? Yes, some firms will say, oh, we're very collaborative and we look out for our people and the kind of the drill. But is it like that in real life? Even the ones that say that, is something to think about. And certainly not every firm is like that. As a matter of fact, the larger the firm and the more it's connected to the market economy, the less that is going to matter. So this next question is, to what extent should law students prioritize exploring their passions and interests versus focusing on building skills and knowledge that will help them secure employment after graduation? I think one of the secrets of getting good grades and doing well in your career, you get good grades when you take classes that appeal to you, meaning when you do things that you're interested in, meaning if you're interested in corporate law, then you take a lot of classes to deal with different types of corporations. If you're interested in litigation, you can take things around that. So when you take classes and you do things that you're interested in, you typically do better. When I talk about passions and interests, that would be you want to channel your passion things into that. Also, when you choose, and again, most people go to work in law firms. So when you choose the law firm, you should try to focus on something that you're interested in. There's no point in doing something you're not interested in. So what does that mean? I know a lot of people that went to great law schools and did well and become contract attorneys. Now, is there anything wrong with that? I don't think that would interest me, because I wouldn't see doing document review and stuff, which is not what all contract attorneys do, but that would not interest me. But at the same time, someone that wants the freedom to go home and doesn't want to have to play the same games, that would be interesting to them. But what I would say is, whatever you do, you should try to do your best to focus on whatever it is that interests you in terms of your practice area, and then try to work with people that you feel support you and not the other way around. And that's tough. It can be tough in a law firm. It can be tough, but that's what you sign up for in certain law firms. I think that, what people are talking about many times when they go to work, when they say, I want to go to a boutique, or when they say those sorts of things, is they're talking about they want to get away from the most aggressive forces of the market economy. So you're going to find the most aggressive forces of the market economy that are going to stress you out and create problems and create a lot of demand on you to have the best work product. You're going to find a lot of that in the largest firms in the largest cities. As you get into smaller markets and smaller firms and firms that may not be as competitive, you're going to get less of that competition, less of that market economy. And that to some people makes them happy, and it should. You can be, but at the same time, you're not going to get the glory of representing the largest clients and making the most money. But does it really matter? That's the question. Is it something that a lot of Yale Law School students think about? I don't know, but I think that they tend to end up in jobs where they're not as accountable, which I think is pretty much can be a very good thing. Oh, sounds like we got a law school on this call or something. How can law schools and legal employers better support public service and social justice initiatives in the legal profession? Law schools, basically, everyone, if you went to a good law school, like a top law school, most law schools, a lot of them will actually pay your student loans if you take a public service job, or some of them will even pay you money in addition to whatever your salary is at a public service organization. Law schools do a lot. They tend to use their endowments and other things to do that. But yeah, law schools will definitely do a lot to support that kind of stuff. Social justice, I think, is a little bit different than public service. So social justice can be a lot of different things, but public service and things, law schools definitely spend a lot of time and seem to like that a lot. There's some of the stuff I've already answered. I can answer it again, but let me just give me 1 second. Okay, so so this is actually a good question. I like this question. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. So this next question is, let me just show it up on the screen. How can law schools and legal employers better prepare law students and legal professionals for unconventional career paths and non-traditional roles in the legal community? I think for one, people need to understand what I just said today. So meaning, I think that the culture of law schools often emphasizes, and people often romanticize working in the largest firms, making the most money. So that's typically where a lot of the focus is. And I don't think that it's necessarily done by the law schools. I think it's the students that go there. So how would you change that? I think that it's cultural, meaning I don't think that the law students at NYU or Columbia or Duke or whatever are ever going to, as a group, meaning 50% or more, which would be Yale Law School. I don't think the majority of students at those schools, unless there's a major cultural change, are going to think differently. Just look at how I described the way I thought about things. And I think you pick that up based on the students, the people that you're working with. What's interesting, I just wanted to give an aside for this point, and I think it's an important point, is what is the point of going to a top college, or what is the point of going to a top law school or whatever? Like, what's the point of it? Do you learn something different? Are you getting better professors? And what is the point? Why do people do it? And it's obviously the better law school you get into, it shows your ability to get into that law school, meaning you have to be very smart or whatever, and you have to be very motivated. So it does show that. But so that's a credential and you can get a better job. But actually, the reason that it's important to get into the best school many times is because of the people that you're around. And so those people will have goals and they'll think about the world in a certain way. And they'll be, I'll just tell you an example. My daughter grew up with friends. Some of them go to schools in maybe Calabasas, which is a kind of more of a professional, meaning doctors and lawyers and things like that go there, and business people. And there's also another school that a lot of her friends that she grew up with, a public school in Malibu. And the people in Malibu are culturally not all doctors and lawyers and professionals. They tend to be more entertainment and models and things. And so the kids in the school that she knows that go to these Malibu schools, their career goals are to be models and they're dating and doing all this stuff. And the kids in schools and the opposite is the case at Calabasas, where everyone's working hard, and not everyone, but the culture is different. So you go to schools and things because you want to be exposed to the people there and the way they think about things. The people from Yale Law School think a different way than people from Michigan or Duke or whatever, or Columbia or NYU. They think about things differently. And that's the benefit. That's what you're paying. That's why you try to go to a school like Yale Law School. It's because of the kind of people that you're around and what their goals are. And when I was in college, I knew nothing about being an attorney, but being an attorney, I didn't know what kind of grades you needed to go to a good law school. I didn't know anything. But the second I got to the school, I started having all these people say, this is what you need to do. This is how you do it. This is what this person did. This is what this. And so everyone starts talking, and then your goals change and what's important to you changes. And that's pretty cool, because you're going to get a different perspective. If you go to a school that's all about football, and that's the biggest thing there, you may be exposed to different types of thinking and stuff than you're going to be exposed to if you go to MIT. Just think about it. It's just different. That's, how I think that works. Okay, I think I have a lot of law schools on this today. I don't know if I invited them or. Here's another question. These questions are actually very well written too, for some reason. There's not a lot of typos. And okay, what are some key differences in how Yale Law School approaches legal education compared to other schools, and how can students take advantage of these differences to maximize their career opportunities? Again, I'm not an expert in Yale Law School and what its classes are like. I do know that historically, like they have people's first semester, I think that they didn't grade or something. I don't know if they still do that, to allow people to learn the stuff without the pressure of grades. So maybe that is something that helps. I think that the level of debate and interest in the subject matter, when you take a bunch of people that have incredible academics and smarts and not only that, but took really difficult and interesting courses and stuff in law school, I think that maybe would create a different level of debate. And what am I saying that? So I see people all the time that you can go to NYU, and again, it's a great law school. I'm not criticizing it, but you can go to NYU or Michigan or all these schools, and you could major in sports medicine or something, or whatever, arts and crafts or something. You can measure and then get a good LSAT score and get into those schools. And you can do it at Florida State. You can do it it's just how it works. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Yale Law School tends to not take those kind of people. It takes people that, when I see these resumes, and it's like, there's people, I don't know, there's a lot of classics or just very interesting college resumes that you wouldn't really otherwise, or college courses and stuff that are not normal. And they tend to be a lot of people from very good schools and very academic, and it's just much different. And so that's one of the differences, I think. Yeah, let's see this next question. How can law schools and legal employers balance the need for rigorous grading systems? Okay. An evaluation, the importance of de-emphasizing grades in order to promote a more collaborative and exploring learning environment. Okay, Yale Law School, I think, does that in terms of their first year with, no grades, or their first semester. But I think that in order for the graduates of most law schools to get jobs with good firms and so forth, they need to basically have some students that do really well, some that don't do as well, so employers can distinguish between them. And so I don't know that it's ever going to be that way. For example, if you go to, I don't know what a good law school, USC, which is a good law school, they're not going to give everyone no grades or not emphasize that because not everybody from that school is going to be able to get into a great law firm. So they have to break people up into different types of grades, and they have to sort their graduates. So that's why you need grades. And they're even more important as you move down the pecking order of law schools, because when you get down to top 100 schools and things, which are still really good, the biggest and the best law firms are going to want to hire the very best students out of those schools, and they're not going to pay attention to the ones that aren't the best. If you go to, Wayne State, great law school in Detroit, if you want to get a job in a big law firm in Detroit, you're going to have to do really well there and be very top of your class. If you want to get a big job in Chicago, which is possible, you might need to be very high, like 1 or 2 in the biggest firm. That's just how law firms do it. So there's no way that grading is ever going to not be rigorous. And so they need it, and they can't really de-emphasize grades. And for that reason, work environments are not collaborative and exploratory, like you're saying, because everyone is very competitive with one another. And I saw that when I was in law school, how much competition there was, and people are just very competitive. And unfortunately, law firms are like that too, because especially large law firms, because no one necessarily has a lot of employment stability. And the culture of those firms is really about providing the best service they can to the clients. And so people are often walking on pins and needles and doing everything they possibly can to do the absolute best work. Okay. And that's what they're promoting. Okay. How can legal professionals and employers better support and mentor young lawyers? And what are the benefits of doing so, both for the individuals and the profession as a whole? I think mentoring is actually pretty important. And I think it's important, especially for younger attorneys. And I think it's important for law firms to do as good of a job as they can with retention. A lot of times the reason that law firms lose people is they feel like the law firm doesn't care about them or is not paying attention to them or not necessarily talking to them in a way or not making them feel welcome or supported. So I think that law firms should definitely try to do that. I remember when I was at a law firm, I was assigned a mentor, and I used to call that mentor and say, hey, I wanted to talk to him and meet with him. And he would always blow me off, and not because of me specifically, just because he was always really busy. And then he was a mentor to one other attorney too. And I remember he took us out for lunch once, and that was the extent of it. But had he made an effort to actually mentor me and talk to me and give me advice, I might have ended up spending a lot more time at that firm. So I think that if you're a young attorney and you're working in a law firm, it's important that you find a mentor or multiple mentors that you can talk to and identify with, because those people will support you and give you information that you normally wouldn't get. So that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm trying to give you insight and information into the legal profession that's going to help you. What you learned today is very helpful. You're learning that you can avoid stress by finding things outside of big law firms that will make you where there's not as much accountability and where you may not make as much money, but you may do more important things or have more career satisfaction. So I'm learned about that. I would say that mentors are extremely important and really something that everyone should do their best to seek out. Okay. Well, this is funny, but I'll answer this question. It says, what motivated you to do this webinar? And what is your personal experience with Yale's approach to education? What motivated me to do this webinar? I'm motivated by the idea that you need to understand that working in a law firm is about, and working in any legal job is about renting yourself out. And meaning you want to rent yourself out as efficiently as possible. And by as efficiently as possible, where can you get the highest rent possible with the least amount of stress and the most career satisfaction and in the long run, and give yourself the most options. And so that's what I think that Yale Law School is doing. And what is my understanding of their approach to legal education? I don't have any particular understanding of legal education other than many graduates that I've run across. I do think that because people go to that school many times, they do have a very inflated sense of their importance and maybe rightly, and they tend to, but that is interesting in the sense that sense of importance and so forth may actually end up harming them. I don't know that it does, but it may. And so that's just something to keep in mind. But at the same time, I think they make very good career decisions. If being an attorney in your life is about being happy and healthy, and if you want to be creative and stuff, then I think that they're doing a lot of stuff very right compared to working in a law firm. And again, I make my living because of law firms. I'm certainly not an expert in every aspect of this, but and I'm not trying to talk you out of working in a law firm, but it's just different. It's about, and I think that a lot of people would be happier not working in law firms. I don't think I would have been happy in one of these public service type jobs. I think I would like a law firm better than that, but that's just me. You describe Yale Law School's grading system as de-emphasized. Can you explain what this means and how it differs? The only thing is the idea of not grading people the first semester, pass, fail, honors, and I think they have which is basically C, B, I don't know, but I think the grading system isn't as rigorous, and because it's not, that people are able to think more about issues, maybe, I don't know. That would be one way that I would think about it. I'm, again, not entirely sure. I'm not an expert in Yale Law School. I see what happens to people's careers based on it. And okay, so let me just see here. There's one, I have to get going in a second. So I will answer the questions I'm missing this week. And there's several. I was trying to find a good, okay, I'm just going to answer this one and then I'll do the rest of them next week. Okay, so how do you think the legal profession is changing, and what skills and traits do you think will be most important for lawyers in the future? So I think that one of the big changes is going to be things like AI, coming to the legal profession. I don't think it's going to eliminate attorneys, but I think your ability to use these tools efficiently and is going to be very important. I think you need to learn how to do things like check documents, come up with different aspects of things that you can do with it, and to be very effective with it. And I think that to me is one of the most important things I can leave you with. I think that people that are able to use that, and I think that people overseas will be able to use it. And so I think you need to become an expert in how to use it. If I was you, I would take all the classes and continuing education, everything I could. I also think that experts, that you need to be a specialist and not a generalist. I think that is one of the most important things I can tell you, because clients pay for scarcity, law firms hire for scarcity. So the more you're a specialist, the better off you're going to be. Okay, thank you for being on this webinar. I apologize, there's a bunch of questions I didn't get to, but I will make sure that in the webinar next week, that the first questions I ask are the ones I didn't get to. And the one I just answered was actually the last one we had. There's a bunch before it, but I thought it was interesting. So thank you for being in this webinar, and I will see you next week. And I think next week is going to be about second round interviews. So that'll be a fun webinar as well. So thank you.